Cheers.
Cheers,
Some coffee.
Brian.
Last night we were cheersing with something
a little
else.
stronger.
Yeah, indeed. Great to see you this morning.
Thank
How you doing?
I am doing well, rested. This is a beautiful location,
It is,
so
isn't
I
it?
can't complain.
Yeah, no, I did sleep well. Where's the Google T-shirt and apparel? You don't have a Google blazer?
I was joking with my colleague. This morning I got up and I said, I'm going to wear a white shirt. And I pulled it out of my closet, and it turns out it was my daughter's shirt. That never works out well.
See, there's a use case for AI right there. I'm making sure that doesn't
Thankfully, I
happen.
had another shirt. Otherwise, you'd see me wearing the T-shirt from last night.
And you've
But,
got the.
but I'm wearing my Google socks, by the way.
Do you have the Bard implant like already plugged in? Is it working this morning?
I think I had my wife implant in my head, so that overrules everything else in life.
Well, listen, all seriousness, it's great to have you here. Thanks for Google's support of the event and for being such a great partner of Bloomreach's as well. Bloomreach, of course, relies on the Google Cloud to ensure it delivers a high-performant, reliable solution that we've been discussing. But of course, it's been an interesting time. Google, of course, at the forefront of really innovation in generative AI. Really, many of the seminal, papers and models that all this innovation has kind of been fueled from. And then, of course, now, bringing some really important products to market. And it's still early days, but I'm interested from the Google perspective. Where do you think we're at in this adoption curve and in the evolution of generative AI and its impact on the marketplace?
Yeah, listen, it's an understatement to say this thing has caught us. It's a tsunami, and I love this. I was talking to one of our leaders who is responsible for Gen AI at Google, and we were talking about the four revolutions we've experienced. Mm-hmm. One is obviously well before your and my time, which was the Industrial Revolution. And then we had the computer revolution happen. And then thanks to Mr. Jobs, we had the mobile phone revolution. And I think we are at the cusp of something very, very cool, which is the generative AI revolution. And for me, it's an amazing time to be at Google, simply because I think when I look at Google's DNA, there are a few things that Google has always done well on, which is one, focus on the user, which our customers appreciate, because if we focus on the end user, we all win, right? Mm-hmm. So think about all the products we brought in, and search is probably the leading example of it. I think the second thing, which is really, really interesting for me, and which I think puts us in a pivotal position, is the 10x thinking. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the 20% project people do on their own time, or Area 120, which we do a lot of this innovation, or Google X, we have a lot of things happening that start to tie this together, right? I mean, if you think about generative AI, it's actually not new for Google, because artificial intelligence has been woven into the fabric of all our products. And then number three is, I don't think at Google we're afraid to iterate and improve things. I mean, look at Chrome or Android as great examples of where they were when they first launched 10, 15 years ago and where they are today. And then last but not the least, this is the part I really enjoy being at Google for, is democratizing information. We are the number one company in terms of contributing to open source for generative AI. So from that perspective, I think it's amazing to be at Google, but I think it's more amazing for what Google can bring to our customers and partners like yourself. So I'm super excited. I spend a lot of time talking to C-level folks around the country, having this conversation around how do we get prepared for generative AI, and more importantly, in these early days, what are the foundational things we can do so we are set up for success?
So that brings a great question. Like, as you engage with the C-suite, across a variety of industries, I think you're engaging with ISV technology providers such as Bloomreach. You're also engaging with businesses from a wide variety of industries. What's top of mind? What are people really focusing on right now, and what should we be thinking about?
I think it's really interesting. It's like I sense two emotions, because emotions drive everything, right? One is excitement. Everyone wants to be part of this. The second is the fear of unknown. And I think both are very valid and, what I say, important emotions to recognize, because if we don't get this right, and if we don't do this right, we could seriously either jeopardize our businesses or lose the trust of our consumers.
Right.
So that's really what I talk about, right? Is generative AI is the next frontier.
Yeah.
But in order for us to unlock the promise of generative AI, guess what is the number one fundamental thing we have to do? Data.
Right. Of course.
We have to have the foundational data and privacy principles in place, because we are also now starting to flirt with the ethical boundaries of what we can or cannot do. And so my advice to every single customer is, the first thing you want to do is lay down the foundation of what your data and privacy principles are, because at the end of the day, if we lose the trust of our consumers, it's all for naught.
I think that's excellent advice. Honestly, as I think about that, I come to a similar conclusion. I mean, now is the time. If you're thinking about, the impact of generative AI and making sure your organization is prepared, I think it's really important that you have a strong, ethical data foundation. Having the right data models in place, being able to aggregate, normalize, synthesize data from a variety of different sources that then you can use later or use now, but start to play with now, and be able to ensure that you're able to deliver the customer experience that reinforces trust, reinforces customer loyalty and engagement, but also then can give you consistent insights in the back office, help you understand your brand voice and what's working, all these kinds of things that we've been talking about as potential application of generative AI. If you don't have that data foundation, there's really, as you said, a strong chance you're going to get off course.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I will tell you, just to kind of continue with the question you originally asked me, right? The other piece of advice I give our customers is identify your strategic partners, because you don't have to go alone on this journey.
Right.
And you can't.
No, it's
for
too
a number
big.
of reasons.
It's too big.
Because A, it's too big. B, we're still scratching the surface. And C, there aren't a lot of trained professionals. We are learning as we go. Even at Google, we are learning as we go, right? So at Google, we will contribute with both our, like everything from upskilling our customers' resources to providing our own experts to help you identify what are the use cases and how to then go launch those use cases. Because here's the other thing which I worry about, right? Technology is really cool. I'll give you an example. You remember back in the 60s and 70s, those lamps you can clap on and off?
I'm not sure how old you are, but 60s might be a stretch for me to remember.
But I remember those.
By the way, you look
videos.
Amazing for being 95.
I do, actually. That's where Google technology comes into play, right? But I would watch. So I love watching.
No, I do remember.
No. But I love watching
on,
old
off.
videos.
Yes.
Because I think there's a lot of lessons you learn from history. Even though it was before your time and before I was even born, right? However, when you're sitting in a studio that is 10 by 10, and you can reach, I talked to my nephew about this, right? He lives in Netherlands. He's got a one bedroom, and he has Google devices connect over. He can literally reach across and switch off the light, and he says, "Google, can you switch off the light?" That is cool. That's not useful. So I think as we think about generative AI use cases, it's very important for us to distinguish between useful and cool, because useful also automatically captures return on investment.
Correct.
Because if we are putting money into it, and this will require significant investment of both people and dollars, we need to be able to make sure someone is willing to pay for it, someone finds it useful. That's my other piece of advice for people.
Well, I think there's been a lot of debate, right? Is this yet another thing that we're kind of hyping, right, in the industry as we talk about the impact? We're coming off an era not too long ago where it felt like every conversation was on the impact of crypto, the metaverse, right? I happen to have been a bit skeptical, and I was public about my opinion on the impact of those things on digital commerce, so we don't need to rehash that. But I think generative AI is fundamentally different because of all the different opportunities for actual application in a useful way.
Yeah.
Right. Whether that's back office efficiency, improving the productivity of teams that are actually, to be frank, running very lean today. So this notion that we're going to see a ton of job loss to me feels a little misguided, because inside a lot of the organizations, certainly in our industry, these are small teams.
Yeah.
So the addition of these tools to help with content creation, content variation, testing, optimization, personalization, these are welcome additions essentially to the team. And then you think about the evolution opportunities around the customer experience. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. It's funny. I was having this conversation last night, and I totally stole this from somebody.
It's okay. You can attribute it to me.
I'll attribute it to you. We have this fear of new technology, and we have this fear of what generative. But somebody said this to me a few weeks ago, actually, maybe a couple of months ago. They said, when computers first came out, everyone said librarians would be out of a job. But do you know which librarians were out of jobs? The ones who didn't learn how to use computers.
Exactly.
So I think generative AI will enhance this. Right? If you think about a customer and how enterprises think, we are at Google hoping to provide, let's start with the business analyst, an intuitive way to unlock complex data. That is going to increase time to value. We are working with the creative side of the customers to be able to generate more efficiently video, music, text, everything that can enhance and amplify your marketing and your scale, right? We're now also trying to provide a lot of choice and a lot of thought into how your practitioners can take advantage of AI in a way that it already enhances your investments in your machine learning platforms. It should be additive and not deductive, right? We are thinking through all of those things. And then on top of that, if you think about things like your customer teams and how conversational AI, which Google has launched, and we've had it, now we're adding generative AI to it, how it's going to help personalize the experiences. Like, I was reading this survey. It's very, very interesting to me that 61% of the people expect a personalized experience. But what's more interesting
actually,
is
my research shows it's higher than that even.
I wouldn't be surprised. There are a lot of studies floating. What's another stat that jumped out at me? 3 out of 4 people want to feel that they've had a personalized interaction with the retailer, even though it may not be all human.
Right.
Now, if you look at psychology, we all want to feel like we are individuals and we're treated individually. So it makes complete sense, right? With generative AI, we're allowing ourselves to have that opportunity and use technology to provide that kind of experience.
I agree. Actually, this is why I'm kind of bullish on the impact of generative AI on the customer experience, because I think if you've been playing around with these tools, you quickly learn how it can adapt to you and your inputs and your prompts and so on, right? And you can quickly start to think about in the not too distant future, the interactions I have with a generative AI backed system has the potential to have a dialogue with me that is much more personalized and probably more knowledgeable than a typical, not an atypical. An excellent salesperson is going to be hard to replace, but a typical salesperson, you may see that generative AI actually provides, as a consumer, a better experience. And then once that starts to happen, consumers are going to feel very differently about interacting with machines, essentially, to use that kind of a term. And certainly these kinds of digital systems. And I think that could lead to some pretty profound and interesting changes. But I don't really think it's dystopian, in my opinion. I think it's actually got a lot of opportunity to improve a whole host of things, as well as make these systems more accessible. More accessible to people who don't speak English as a first language, for example, or have other disabilities or different challenges or have different cultural backgrounds, a whole host of different things that suddenly change. There will be some downsides and things we need to look out for. As you've indicated, it's really important that everyone think about this very thoughtfully.
Yeah. And sorry to interject.
No,
to
please.
Add to it, right? Forget people who English may not be the first language, and it's not mine, although I do pretend it's my first language. But even people who, so it's like Bloomreach does search and you do engagement, right? Think about it. I go to a website, pick any retailer and said, I want red shoes. Now, knowing where I'm coming from, what interactions I've had and using generative AI, I can put context around it differently. If it knows
Just like
who
a
I
great
am,
salesperson would.
exactly.
But let's be honest, like salespeople, finding good ones who can train and have the domain knowledge and understanding of the catalog and all these different aspects, that's hard to do.
Yeah, believe me, I know.
Yeah.
I try to hire the best salespeople.
Yeah.
It's a hard job.
Exactly. Kind of getting back to Google here. You're obviously working with the Google Cloud capabilities and working with a variety of clients and so on, as we talked about. What's your perspective on businesses essentially building on top of, let's say, public cloud infrastructure, segregating data, and then trying to build their own models and trying to, like, in a sense, tune their own system in a very bespoke way versus using, kind of commercially available services and so on? What are you seeing and what are you sensing in terms of that happening?
It's an interesting question you ask, right? Because I think at the end of the day, just like individuals want to be treated like individuals, enterprise have individualistic needs as well, right? And part of the reason our Gen AI philosophy is operating on what I call the 5 pillars. Number one pillar is we want to make sure when we work with our customers, we are finding ways of making sure your IP is protected, because you've heard of horror stories of this one very famous consumer electronic brand, global brand, where they were playing with one of our competitors and their IP leaked into the wild. No bueno, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is we want to make sure we're providing choice and value. To your point, right? Just one big large model doesn't address everything. So we at Google are trying to think about how do we offer choice so the return on investment is justified as you implement Gen AI, right? The third, which is also important, is around how do we ground everything on factuality. Now, this is where I think Google has a definitive advantage over everyone, right? As you as a customer, as you're servicing your consumer, you not only need to provide them answers, but you need to provide them answers and be able to tell them where the answers came from, the source of truth. And guess what? All the trillions.
So explain the AI, essentially.
Exactly. Like, I ask a question, I can get an answer, but how do I know the answer is accurate, and how do I know who actually came up with the answer, right? And because of our search pedigree, we're able to do that. Number 4, I think, which is never something you can understate, is security. How do we ensure that when you work with Google, our paramount interest is to make sure that your systems are secure as you are unlocking all this data? And number 5, honestly, is how do we make it easy? Whether it's through tools, it's through trainings, or it's through the different models and APIs we offer, the ability for you to be able to take advantage of generative AI. So that's really the fundamental core philosophy of how Google thinks about generative AI.
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating time. We're out of time. Vikas, thank you so much for joining us here. Fascinating conversation, and always great to see you, and have a wonderful rest of the conference as well.
Likewise, cheers. Hopefully we get to grab another
All right.
drink soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.